Oh my God, you're so clumsy. People like you should never have been here. The words sliced through the glamorous party like a knife. The music halted mid-note. The crystal chandeliers still glittered above the gilded hall. But every eye turned to one place. The woman sprawled on the marble floor, her white dress stained with deep red wine. Genevieve Carrington, her silver hair sculpted like a steel crown, stepped forward, her voice hissing through clenched teeth like acid. You are nothing, not worthy of breathing the same air as us. Guards, drag her out before she stains this floor any further. Laughter cracked like whips. Men in tailored tuxedos and women in silk gowns smiled with blades for lips. Phones lifted high, circling like modern vultures over a wounded prey. On the floor, Maya Laurent slowly pressed her palms down and rose. The once pristine white dress clung to her, marred by a scarlet blotch. A stain, a humiliation. Yet when she raised her head, her eyes held no tears, no trembling, only the cold light of a storm awakening. No one in that hall knew the truth. The woman they mocked was not a stray guest, not a maid who had slipped into the party, not an outsider to their world. She was the sole person holding the power to sign a $2.5 billion contract, a contract the Carringtons needed more than air itself. But that truth was hidden, and the room reveled in cruelty. For Maya, this moment had not begun with spilled wine. It had started hours earlier, at the grand penthouse entrance owned by the Carrington family. Chicago in late December was brutal, snow falling like needles. She stepped from a modest black sedan. Not a limousine, no uniformed driver, just a discreet luxury car. She wore a simple white dress, her hair in a high bun, diamond earrings catching the icy light. Elegance without ostentation. As she approached the entrance, a young valet rushed over, not to open the door, but to point toward the dark alley. Staff entrance is back there. Maya froze, then handed him her invitation. He rolled his eyes, scanning her from dress to skin to gaze, then sighed reluctantly and waved her through. But that was only the prelude. At the velvet rope stood Mark, the guard, eyes sharp with suspicion. Dozens of white guests before her had flashed invitations and been greeted with warmth. But when it was her turn, everything shifted. He held her card like it was counterfeit, shone a flashlight on it, checked the list 3 times, then shook his head. No Laurent here. I need to see ID. Maya offered her license. Mark inspected it like TSA hunting for a terrorist. She stood in the snow for nearly 90 minutes as couples and businessmen streamed past into the warm glow of the hall, not one of them subjected to scrutiny. Only her, a black woman, an intruder. Through the glass, she saw Mark laughing with colleagues, never once making a verification call. It wasn't protocol. It was power, a petty ritual designed to make her wait, shiver, and question whether she belonged. She remained silent, waiting, enduring. Each passing minute sharpened her patience into steel. When she finally entered, she had already missed the opening, the cocktails, the crucial weaving of connections, all of it orchestrated to strip her of place. Yet she walked on, head high, and instantly the entire room turned. My God, which maid wandered in here? Genevieve Carrington shrieked, her pitch slicing the air. Victor Carrington, the patriarch, his face flushed with drink, barked. This is a private party, not a job fair. Guards! Laughter erupted. Preston, 30, the son, raised his glass. Did someone call housekeeping? Maybe the bathrooms need cleaning. Sloane, 28, the daughter, smiled sweetly with false pity. Perhaps she's looking for a broom, Someone help her find it. Phones lifted everywhere, capturing the humiliation. Maya Laurent became the unwilling star of a cruel spectacle. She swallowed her fury and asked for water. The bartender glanced at Genevieve, who shook her head. Not a drop for her kind. The crowd roared with laughter. Preston staggered closer, wine spilling over his glass. If you want to be useful, the kitchen might have work for you. Laughter thundered like a storm. The climax came when Sloane approached with a glass of Bordeaux, swirling dark red. Her voice was soft, feigned kindness dripping with venom. You must be thirsty. Let me help. For an instant, Maya hesitated, believing perhaps this was a sliver of grace. She reached for the glass. Then came the fall. Sloane's silk hem brushed, her foot nudged, and Maya stumbled, crashing onto the marble floor. Red wine exploded across her white dress like a mortal wound. Sloane gasped theatrically, hand over her mouth. Oh dear, so clumsy. I only wanted to help. Genevieve rushed forward, her shriek echoing. You see, this is what happens when people forget their place. Guards, get her out. The room erupted. Laughter, camera flashes, vicious delight. Preston filmed, choking with laughter. This will go viral, guaranteed. Where's housekeeping? Oh wait, she is housekeeping? Maya lay there, white turned crimson, but her eyes shed no tears. She rose slowly, each motion funereal. The laughter thundered on, but some began to feel the chill. In her hand, her phone vibrated, its glow illuminating her calm face. No one noticed, no one understood that this call was the Carringtons' death sentence. She inhaled deeply. To Genevieve she was contempt, to Preston and Sloane, amusement, to the room, a trespasser to ridicule. But the truth was this: every single one of them lived by the signature of the woman they had just humiliated. In that moment, Maya Laurent saw it clearly. They did not see her as human, only as skin and presumed inferiority. Yet their arrogance would bury the entire Carrington dynasty, because tonight, in this very hall, they had insulted the undercover CEO wielding $62 billion of power, and they had no idea they had already dug their own graves. The laughter had not yet faded. The orchestra, hired to play elegant waltzes, now sat silent, turning the grand ball into a circus where human dignity became amusement. Everyone thought the humiliation was over, that it was only a matter of time before security dragged the intruder out. But what they didn't know was that the real performance was only beginning. Standing in the sea of cruelty, Maya Laurent adjusted her gown. The white silk, now blotched with crimson, looked like a war robe dyed in blood. She said nothing. Just a moment of silence, but one heavy as a storm held back. Inside her, memories surged, her grandmother's calloused hands scrubbing floors in wealthy homes, whispering, "You must study, you must go far. Never let anyone make you believe you are less because of your skin." Tonight, in a gilded ballroom, those words became a thunderous command. Across the room, Victor Carrington leaned forward, posturing power. "Enough. This is the Carrington family's gala, not a charity ward. Security, get her out." The word Carrington echoed like an oath, but at that very instant, Maya's phone lit with a message from her legal counsel. "Maya, all merger contracts for the $2.5 billion deal are ready, just awaiting your signature. Shall we announce tonight? One line, one decision, and a death sentence for the Carrington family." In Victor's mind, this moment was supposed to be different. Tonight, as guests raised glasses and the press covered the event, he would unveil the deal of the century: Carrington Industries merging with Aurelian Stratos, A 2.5 billion transaction, a miracle to rescue his empire from crushing debt. No one else knew the truth, that the Carrington empire was hollow, its towers mere shells hiding financial collapse. Victor had mortgaged assets, borrowed at ruinous rates, clinging to Aurelion's promise of salvation. The future of his family, his wife, his children, his dynasty, all depended on one signature. And the tragedy was that the woman holding that signature stood before him, in a gown stained with wine, the very one he had just humiliated without mercy. While Victor's forehead dampened with sweat, Genevieve Carrington thrived. Tonight was her stage. She cared nothing for profit or loss, only for the reverence of high society. She wielded exclusion as a weapon. Those who displeased her vanished from guest lists. Those she disdained never received invitations to her charity boards. Her existence was bound to one belief. She was the center of the world, and others were trash. When she saw Maya in the hall, she sneered. Look, living proof. The low-born in expensive dresses remain stains on luxury. Preston Carrington, face red from whiskey, lifted his phone to capture Maya's fall, his laugh piercing. The comedy of the century. The internet will go wild. To him, humiliation was fuel for a fragile ego. He had never created value, only squandered wealth. Sloane stood a step behind, smile sweet as honey, but eyes sharp as blades. She was the one who tripped Maya. Now she performed innocence, voice dripping with false sympathy. Oh, I only wanted to help. She was clumsy, not my fault. The crowd nodded and laughed, blind to the staged cruelty. Amid the chaos, Maya stood, wiping wine from her hand. Her heart pounded, but her face was terrifyingly calm. She scanned the room, the mocking faces, the contemptuous eyes, the fingers typing mocking hashtags. Not one realized they were now actors in a play that would destroy them. In that instant, Maya thought of the 250,000 employees of Aurelian Stratos, people who believed in her vision, families sustained by the jobs she had created. She thought of her grandmother, who died sick after years of toil without proper care. Pain became steel. Steel became decision. A phone alert chimed. A single sound, but it tolled like a funeral bell through the hall of wine and diamonds. Maya answered, her voice steady. Maya Laurent. On the line, Kevin Tran, Chief Legal Counsel, spoke clearly. Ms. Laurent, all merger documents with Carrington are ready. The press and investors await. I can release them once you sign electronically. What is your command? A few guests nearby caught words like merger, documents, Laurent. They frowned, though the crowd kept laughing. Maya locked eyes with Genevieve, then Preston, then Sloane. Each gaze landed like a hammer. Kevin, she said, her voice cold as steel. Cancel everything, every contract, every agreement. Erase Carrington from every file, effective immediately. Silence on the line for one beat, enough for the air itself to change, though few grasped it. Then Kevin's voice returned, firm. Understood, Ms. Laurent. I will confirm at once. Those close enough to hear froze. The name Laurent was no stranger. Laurent was the founder of Aurelion, the mysterious, powerful conglomerate worth tens of billions. Rumors swirled of a hidden CEO who never appeared publicly. And now, the truth assembled before their eyes. The woman they had mocked was Maya Laurent. Laughter cracked, then faltered, breaking into awkward coughs. Phones lowered, eyes shifted. But Genevieve still hadn't understood. She was still recounting the humiliation to her circle, laughing loudly. She's probably calling her landlord, or maybe posting bail. From the corner, Victor's face drained of color. He had heard 2 words: cancel everything, and Laurent. His heart hammered, his legs trembled. Suddenly he shoved through the crowd, stumbling before Maya, voice hoarse. I'm sorry. What name did you say?" "Which Laurent?" Maya ended the call. Her eyes cut into Victor like a blade, piercing his mask of arrogance. Her voice rang out, clear, cold, heavy as a verdict. Maya Laurent, founder and CEO of Aurelion Stratos. From her clutch, she drew a black steel card etched in platinum. Every line shimmered, worth more than weeks of wages for those who served here. She handed it to Victor with calm finality, as if delivering a decree. His hands shook as he took it. When his eyes finished the words, his glass slipped, shattering on marble. The sound cracked the air. Every laugh died. Every phone stopped recording. Silence smothered the hall. Genevieve, Preston, Sloane, their mocking grins drained into pale horror. They understood now. The woman they had ridiculed was the sovereign of $62 billion, the arbiter of their dynasty's fate. In that moment, they realized their laughter had become the obituary of the Carrington legacy, and Maya Laurent, clad in a gown stained crimson, was no longer a victim. She was a queen risen from ashes, ready to pronounce judgment. Victor's glass shattered on the marble floor, breaking apart like his own fate. The sound echoed through the hall, silencing hundreds of guests mid-laughter, every eye fixed on his trembling hand, where the platinum-etched steel business card still gleamed. Maya Laurent, founder and CEO, Aurelion Stratos. The room fell quiet like a chapel after the final bell. That name was no stranger. Aurelion, the $62 billion empire, the beast behind technologies, real estate, supply chains. Yet no one had ever seen the true face of its founder. She was known only as a shadow, a ghost who pulled the strings of markets. Tonight, that ghost stood revealed in the Carrington ballroom. Victor shook violently, his lips stammering. "My God, you are Washington!" "No, Laurent, you are Aurelion." Genevieve Carrington rushed forward, still oblivious. She snatched the card from her husband's hand and read each word aloud. At first, her face stayed hard, ready to hurl another insult, but with every syllable, her complexion drained, her eyes glistened. No, this cannot be. This is a joke, a cruel joke. Her hand trembled so badly the card nearly slipped from her grasp. The diamond earrings that once sparkled now seemed like shackles tightening around her throat. Preston stood frozen, his phone quivering in his hand, the video he had gleefully filmed now transformed into damning evidence. A guttural sound rose in his throat, but died before it became words. Sloane, the one who had orchestrated Maya's fall, was pale as wax. She no longer smiled, no longer pretended. Only raw fear remained, the fear of realizing she had pushed her entire family into the abyss. The ballroom door swung open. Guests assumed security had arrived to drag Maya away. Instead, a phalanx of attorneys marched in, their steps sharp, their black suits crisp, their briefcases heavy. 12 figures, faces stern, like a legal SWAT team. Leading them was Alicia Monroe, Aurelion's chief legal officer, a black woman with salt and pepper hair and eyes sharp as blades. Her voice rang out, commanding and precise. "Ms. Laurent, by directive, we are here to enforce the immediate cancellation of all contracts and affiliations with the Carrington Group, effective now." A wave of whispers swept the room, each word of cancellation like a hammer blow to the chest. Some guests staggered back, as if they stood at the epicenter of a financial nuclear blast. Phones that had been raised lowered, then lifted again, for all understood they were witnessing history. Alicia opened a thick dossier and read aloud. First, the cancellation of the $2.5 billion merger between Aurelian Stratos and Carrington Industries. Second, the cancellation of all Carrington real estate leases in downtown Chicago. Third, the cancellation of annual supply chain agreements worth $600 million. Fourth, the cancellation of all sponsorships and charitable funds linked to the Carrington family. Fifth, the recall of all outstanding loans, requiring immediate repayment. Each clause was a blade, each figure a pillar collapsing. Victor trembled, his knees buckling as if he would collapse. Genevieve screamed, "No, this is a mistake, just a misunderstanding. One evening cannot erase a century of legacy." Alicia remained unmoved, her tone colder than steel. "This is not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Carrington. This is action, and actions have consequences." Across the hall, faces changed color. Peterson, head of an investment fund, remembered that his firm managed hundreds of millions from Aurelian. Sweat poured down his face. Mrs. Davies, who had laughed loudest when Maya fell, now turned pale, for her husband's logistics company lived off Aurelian contracts. They realized the laughter, the videos, the mocking tweets were not just moral disgrace, but economic suicide. Guests slipped out, pretending to take calls. Others frantically deleted posts. But it was too late. The humiliation video had already gone viral. As Alicia continued reading the termination list, Maya stepped forward into the center of the hall. Her voice rang out, not loud, but resonant enough for all to hear. "You think respect requires knowing I am a CEO? You are wrong. All it takes is knowing I am a human being." The words struck like thunder, exposing a truth long known but never confronted. They hadn't laughed because they knew who she was. They laughed because they believed she was no one. Victor broke down in tears. He collapsed, his voice choked. "Please, Miss Laurent, have mercy on my family. If you cancel this, we lose everything. Think of my wife, my children." Maya looked down at the man who had ordered her thrown out like trash. In her eyes there was no hatred, only a frozen calm. "Do you know, Victor, I was left outside in the cold for nearly 2 hours, denied even a glass of water, treated as garbage by this entire room. Then, I was still a human being. But you chose to forget that. So now, I forget your pleas." Genevieve shuddered, clutching Maya's hand like a drowning woman. "Please, just one chance. We can make this right. Do not destroy our legacy." Maya pulled her hand away, her gaze like ice. "This is not legacy. This is delusion built on cruelty. And I am only doing one thing, placing you back where you belong." Genevieve gasped, her breath ragged. Preston choked, his phone slipped, the screen shattering. Sloane covered her face, her makeup streaking down in smears. The Carrington family stood petrified, watching their centuries-old empire disintegrate before their eyes, not by market collapse, but by their own arrogance and malice. In that moment, everyone understood. The opulent gala had transformed into a public tribunal, and the verdict had been delivered. It was not Maya Laurent who had sought them out, but they who had invited her and placed their own heads beneath the blade. The room fell silent. No music, no laughter. Only the scratch of pens signing documents, the shuffle of papers, and the ragged breaths of the Carringtons as they fell from the heights into the abyss. And all knew this was only the beginning. The room was as silent as an opulent tomb. The music was dead. The laughter had turned to ash. Only the scratch of Aurelian's lawyers signing documents and the ragged, shackled breaths of the Carrington family remained. Then another wave swept in, the panic of the onlookers. The guests, politicians, business leaders, philanthropists, those who once thought themselves untouchable, now felt their legs trembling. Each of them understood they were not merely spectators to a humiliation. They had cheered, laughed, filmed, and posted it. An investment fund director hissed under his breath, "Damn it!" I laughed right into the camera. My firm manages Aurelian's money. A logistics company owner turned pale as she remembered her business depended on contracts worth hundreds of millions from Maya's empire. Every laugh she had let out now tightened around her neck like a noose. Some rushed for the doors, others pretended to answer urgent calls. But when the crowd tried to move, they discovered the exits had been locked from within. The Aurelian lawyers had not finished signing, and Maya still stood there. No one could leave until the tribunal was complete. Outside, the storm had already broken. Preston's video, Blair's clip, and dozens of others spread like wildfire. On Twitter, hashtags exploded. Carrington racism, the cost of cruelty, 62 billion lesson. Instagram flooded with images of Maya falling, her gown stained red, captured from every angle. But the mocking captions vanished, hastily deleted and replaced with clumsy excuses. Just a misunderstanding, I didn't mean it. But it was too late. The internet does not forget. A financial news channel had already issued a breaking headline. Mysterious CEO cancels $2.5 billion deal at Carrington Gala. The luxurious penthouse was no longer a private party. It had become a global stage. Genevieve Carrington, once revered at the pinnacle of society, now trembled. Those who had once hung on her every word avoided her gaze. She heard the whispers. My God, she humiliated the CEO herself. Genevieve destroyed her own legacy. Her heels wobbled as though sinking into stone. She saw the future, headlines, charity boards, councils that had once courted her, all turning away. A lifetime of carefully guarded status shattered in a few minutes of cruelty. Preston frantically unlocked his phone, desperate to delete his video. His fingers shook, sweat pouring. But when he opened Twitter, the clip already had millions of views. His own face, his own cruel laughter, had become the emblem of racist arrogance. He choked, whispering, "No, this can't be. I was only joking, but the internet does not distinguish between jest and truth. It only remembers the face of one who laughed at another's humiliation." He knew his career, if he had ever had one, was over. Sloane, the architect of the fall, was ghostly pale. Her bright red lipstick smeared across her face. Her mind replayed the images, pouring the wine, stretching her foot, smirking as Maya fell, all caught from every angle. She had thought it a flawless display of social dominance. Now it was proof of cold-blooded cruelty. For the first time in her life, she wept not for a ruined luxury item, but because she realized her reputation was dead. Victor Carrington, the patriarch, remained on his knees. He was no longer a businessman, no longer a man of power. He was only a beggar, clutching the steel card in his trembling hand like the final nail in his coffin. He thought of the mounting debts, the banks, the creditors. Without the merger, everything would collapse. He saw tomorrow clearly. Bankruptcy filings, repossessed mansions, children fallen from wealth into ruin. And the most terrible truth, it was not the market that destroyed them, but the venom of his own family's words. Maya stepped onto the dais, the place meant for Victor's announcement of the merger. The crystal lights fell upon her, her gown still stained crimson. But no one saw humiliation now. They saw the robes of a queen delivering justice. Her voice carried, each word sharp and merciless. You once said I was not worthy to breathe the air of this room. Now I tell you, it is you who are not worthy to breathe the air bought with Aurelion's money. From this moment, every tie between us is severed, and the consequences, you will bear them alone. The room froze. No one dared cough, no one dared move. Then the silence shattered. Guests began to flee, not from security, but from guilt and fear of association. A businesswoman whispered to her husband, "We cannot stay. If the press sees us here, it's over." Gowns fluttered like frantic butterflies. Tuxedos rushed for the doors. When they finally opened, the cold night air swept in, carrying the sound of frantic footsteps and panicked breaths. Within minutes, half the penthouse had emptied. Everyone sought to discard the Carrington name like a burning coal in their hands. Maya remained still. She did not stop them. She did not need to. The world outside was doing it for her. News, social media, public opinion, all spreading the truth. The Carringtons had buried themselves with their cruelty. She inhaled deeply, and within her was no humiliation, but a strange peace. Her grandmother's words echoed, "Let their pride destroy them." You do not need to shout, only to stand firm. Tonight, in a gilded hall, Maya had stood firm, and the world bowed to witness. Outside, snow fell heavier, laying a white shroud over the city. Inside, the Carringtons lay ruined in silence, surrounded by a handful of mute guests who dared not even breathe. Maya turned away, her eyes sharp as ice, leaving behind those who had just written their own obituary. Tonight, history etched a new line. A dynasty of wealth can perish from a single cruel smile. Snow fell thick outside the penthouse, white flakes swirling as if all of Chicago was witnessing a funeral, not of a single man, but of an entire dynasty. Inside, the real storm had already escaped the gilded walls, pouring into the world through every phone, every tweet, every live stream. The Carrington family had humiliated a woman they thought was no one. The world was about to show them the price of their mistake. Within an hour, the major news outlets blasted breaking headlines. Mysterious CEO cancels $2.5 billion deal after Carrington family humiliates her at gala. CNN, Bloomberg, Reuters, the Financial Times, each headline landed like a hammer on the Carrington name. Images of Maya falling, her gown stained red, flooded global broadcasts. But this time, the captions were no longer mocking. They carried outrage, racism among the elite, the cost of arrogance. A family burns its century-old legacy in one night. On Twitter, millions joined in. The hashtag Carrington Racism surged to #1 worldwide within 3 hours. The way they laughed while she fell, I shivered just watching it. $62 billion of power stood there, but all they saw was her skin. This is karma in its purest form. Thousands called for a boycott of Carrington Industries. Major clients announced the immediate termination of contracts. Investors fled. At the speed of light, the Carrington empire collapsed, not only in the ballroom, but across the digital world under millions of watchful eyes. Preston's video, his cruel laughter, his mocking words, "Did someone call housekeeping?" became a viral meme. His face twisted in a $10,000 tuxedo, laughing until he cried, was overlaid with captions, "When you laugh at someone's pain and lose your family empire." Major accounts remixed the clip, added music, plastered text. Preston, once the self-proclaimed Prince of Carrington, became a global symbol of arrogant ignorance. His phone buzzed endlessly with messages and calls, but not support, only insults, curses, threats of lawsuits. He shouted in desperation, "It was a joke! I didn't mean it." But the internet doesn't listen to excuses. It only remembers his face, his laughter, and ties it forever to the Carrington name. If Preston was branded a clown, Sloane became the villainess. The clip of her offering the wine, tripping Maya, then feigning shock was replayed endlessly, analyzed frame by frame. A body language expert on television concluded, she staged it. This was no accident. This was a calculated humiliation. Outrage consumed the internet. Brands that once invited Sloane as a social ambassador cut ties immediately. Her social media accounts flooded with comments. Cruel, monster in a dress, the face of racism. Sloane collapsed in her room, mascara streaking down her cheeks, realizing she was no longer the queen of the stage, but the condemned in the court of public opinion. Genevieve Carrington, once the loudest voice of mockery, became the centerpiece of both tabloids and financial pages. A photo of her pointing at Maya, mouth twisted in a scream, face distorted with rage, landed on front pages. The caption, "The Philanthropy Queen Exposed." Boards of charities she chaired released joint statements. Carrington no longer has the moral authority to lead. Her phone rang without end, not with invitations, but with demands to resign. Friends once at her side fell silent. She scrambled for defenders, but every door had closed. In financial newsrooms, analysis poured in. Carrington Industries faces bankruptcy. The merger with Aurelian has been cancelled. Massive loans now hang unsecured. Stock will plunge at tomorrow's market open. Victor Carrington scrolled headlines on his phone, his hands shaking. All the secrets he had hidden for years, debts, failures, losses, now lay exposed. He lowered his head, whispering hoarsely, "It's over. And Maya Laurent?" She never raised her voice. She never needed bitter retorts. One command to cancel was enough to turn the Carringtons into financial corpses. While the press, the markets, and the world unraveled, Maya sat quietly, sipping a glass of water, the first drink she'd had that night, the same water Genevieve had denied her. Her gaze was calm, as though watching a play whose ending had already been written. Within her was no glee, only serenity. The world had finally seen the true face of those who thought they stood above others. In the penthouse, the air grew suffocating. Guests who had once mocked Maya scrambled to leave, desperate not to be caught on camera. Weak excuses spilled out. "I wasn't laughing. I was just nearby. I didn't know who she was." But the truth was simple. They had chosen to laugh, and now that choice would haunt them forever. In the cold Chicago night, snow fell in sheets. Outside, the world seethed, debated, judged. Inside, the Carrington family sat frozen, staring at the ruins they had created in a single evening. Maya rose. Her gown was still blotched red, but her eyes blazed. Tonight, she had not only reclaimed her dignity, but redefined power itself. Power was not the money passed down from fathers, nor the castles built on arrogance. Power lay in how one treated others, whoever they were, wherever they came from. And tonight, the world had learned that lesson at the cost of $2.5 billion. The lavish penthouse now felt like a gilded prison. The Carrington family sat in silence, while outside the world erupted in fury. Phones buzzed with non-stop alerts, cancelled contracts, breaking headlines, hashtags spreading like fire. Then Maya Laurent rose. Her gown still blotched red, her voice rang out calm yet resonant as a funeral bell. You think you have diminished me, but in truth you have lifted me higher than ever before. Because from tonight, the Carrington name will no longer be tied to power, but to disgrace, and I will turn the humiliation you inflicted on me into hope for thousands of others. She pulled out her phone, the screen glowing. The entire room held its breath as though awaiting another sentence. "Patricia," Maya said, her tone steady but commanding, "transfer the entire $2.5 billion from the cancelled deal into a new fund. Call it the Grandma Rosa Fund." On the other end, her financial aide paused for a beat, then replied, "Understood, Ms. Laurent. Please confirm the fund's purpose?" Maya glanced at the pale faces of the Carringtons before answering, each word like a nail driven deep. "Every cent will go to invest in founders of color, women, immigrants, those dismissed the way I was. We will build hundreds, thousands of new businesses right here in Chicago, and the Carrington name will be carved into history, not as benefactors, but as a warning of self-destruction." A ripple of whispers ran through the few guests who remained. Some gasped for breath. Others felt a spark in their eyes, not out of sympathy for Carrington, but from the awareness that this moment would be recorded in business history as a move unlike any other. Genevieve screamed, her voice shrill with desperation. "No, you cannot! That money belongs to us. It is my family's future." Maya turned, her eyes glacial. "No, Genevieve, it was never yours. It was a concession I allowed, and you threw it away with your own hands. Now it will belong to those far more deserving." Preston slumped into his chair, hair disheveled. He thought of the penthouse apartments, the supercars, the endless nights of luxury, all of it built on the Carrington legacy. And now, in just hours, all of it had evaporated. His phone vibrated with a message from the bank. "Alert! Your credit accounts have been frozen due to Aurelion's decision." Preston roared like a wounded beast. "This is unfair. One evening and everything vanishes?" Maya looked at him, her gaze heavy with quiet contempt. "Not one evening, Preston. A lifetime of selfishness and cruelty. Tonight is simply when the bill came due." Sloane wept, covering her face, her mind replaying the moment she poured the wine, stuck out her foot, feigned surprise. A single instant, and her entire life was undone. She sobbed, "Please, please forgive us. I only wanted a little fun. I didn't know." Maya cut her off. "You knew very well. You savored that moment. What you did not know is that every act of cruelty carries a cost. And your cost is $2.5 billion and an entire legacy." Victor Carrington remained on his knees, his face ashen as dust. His trembling hand reached forward. "Please, Miss Laurent, think of the 5 generations before us. We built this city. Do not bury it all." Maya's eyes cut into him like ice. 5 generations built a legacy. But you, Victor, set it ablaze. Not me. Tonight, I only pulled back the curtain so the world could see the truth you tried to hide. Victor collapsed, tears streaking down his wrinkled face. For the first time in his life, he felt the weight of total loss, not from a failed deal, but from unrestrained cruelty. Maya turned to the remaining guests, her voice lower now, but carrying to every corner. "Grandma Rosa, the woman who raised me with bleeding hands from scrubbing other people's floors, will have a fund in her name. And that fund will give opportunity to children once told they did not belong in this world." Her voice caught briefly, then sharpened again. "Because I want the world to remember this. From someone dismissed, you can build an empire. And from someone arrogant, you can lose everything in just one night." The room fell into absolute silence. No one dared cough. No one dared blink. Reporters rushed to push her words across the globe. Images of Maya, her red-stained gown, declaring the creation of the Grandma Rosa Fund, dominated headlines worldwide. A financial commentator wrote, "This is not just the cancellation of a deal. It is the redistribution of power from those who believed they had the right to demean others to those who were demeaned." Social media exploded. Millions shared the clip, captions declaring, "Justice is not a privilege, it is a right. This is the new definition of power." Genevieve collapsed into a chair, sobbing, lipstick smeared. Preston slammed his head onto the table in despair. Sloane curled into herself like a shadow. Victor sat in silence, eyes vacant, like a man already dead. Maya turned to leave. But before stepping out, she paused and delivered one final line, soft but unforgettable. "You once said I was nothing. Tonight I showed the world. I am everything you lost." Her heels echoed on the marble, each step heavy as a verdict. And outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing Chicago in white, a shroud for the Carrington legacy. At dawn, as the first light spilled over Chicago's glass towers, the financial world was no longer the same. News of Carrington Night dominated global coverage, rippling through social media and shaking the core of the markets. A deal worth $2.5 billion, once hailed as salvation, had been cancelled in an instant. But the greater shock lay in the reason: blatant racism, exposed under hundreds of cameras. At 9 a.m., the opening bell rang at the NYSE. Carrington Industries' stock chart plunged immediately. Within 15 minutes, over $600 million of market value evaporated. Economic analysts scrambled for airtime. This isn't just a cancelled merger. This is a branding catastrophe. Who would want to be associated with the Carrington name after last night? Lenders have been calling since midnight, demanding repayment. No one wants ties to a family now seen as the face of prejudice. The world watched in hushed awe. Each red line on the trading screens looked like blood draining from a dying giant. Last night, Maya Laurent declared the cancellation of every Carrington contract. This morning, the dominoes began to fall. Grandview Hotels announced the end of their advertising partnership. Bowers and Lee Construction withdrew from a $200 million project. Multiple investment funds crossed Carrington off their portfolios and redirected capital to competitors. The Financial Times splashed the headline, "Carrington, from old money icon to financial zombie in just 12 hours." On Chicago's streets, Carrington event posters were torn down, replaced by graffiti. "Racism costs billions. Respect or collapse." In New York, students gathered outside Carrington headquarters holding signs. "We are Maya Laurent. We will not be silent." Reporters crowded outside the Carrington mansion gates, shouting questions. "Mrs. Genevieve, will you apologize?" "Mr. or Victor, will the company declare bankruptcy?" No one answered. The iron gates stayed shut. But silence was no longer a shield. It was proof of collapse. While Carrington unraveled, Maya Laurent did not appear before the press. She had left the penthouse quietly the night before, retreating to her apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. That morning, Aurelian's website carried only a brief statement. Aurelian Stratos has cancelled all affiliations with Carrington Industries due to severe racist misconduct. The $2.5 billion will be reinvested into the Grandma Rosa Fund to support minority founders in Chicago. No fanfare, no argument. Just a decision as ruthless as it was final. That silence was more terrifying than 1,000 speeches. It proved that Maya did not need to shout for the world to listen. Her power spoke for itself. In her ornate bedroom, Genevieve Carrington sat motionless before the mirror. The night's sobbing had swollen her eyes. Smudged lipstick clung to her lips. Diamond earrings still dangled, but they no longer shone with grandeur, only bitter irony. Her phone rang endlessly. Resignation demands from charity boards, notices to withdraw from elite clubs. Long-time friends had gone silent. No one answered her calls. Genevieve clutched Maya's steel card, her hand trembling. The platinum-etched letters glinted, reminding her that everything she had prided herself on was gone, leaving only ashes. Preston woke from a nightmare into another. His phone overflowed with insults and curses. The video he had filmed was now the top meme on TikTok, remixed with garish music. He opened his laptop to check the small investment firm his family had built for him, only to find an email from partners. "We are terminating our cooperation, effective immediately." He screamed, hurling the laptop against the wall. But no matter how many devices he broke, he could not erase the image of himself, laughing as a woman fell. Sloane hid behind drawn curtains in her bedroom, but social media would not let her hide. Her name trended globally, tied to clips of her pouring wine, tripping Maya, and faking shock. Brands that once sponsored her issued statements. "We do not condone Miss Carrington's behavior. All representation contracts are terminated." She stared into the mirror at her mascara-smeared face. For the first time, she realized beauty could not save an empty soul. In his private office, Victor Carrington hunched over his computer, watching charts bleed red. Bank after bank called, demanding immediate repayment. No exceptions. His head sank onto the desk, hands gripping his temples. The empire he had inherited was gone, and the cruelest truth was that it had not fallen to war or crisis, but to one night, one arrogance, one act of cruelty. It was not just Chicago or New York. From London, Paris, and Tokyo to Johannesburg, the media carried the story. A European outlet declared, "When racism brings down a century-old empire." In Africa, a paper wrote, "Maya Laurent, the new face of global business justice." In Asia, young people shared the clip of Maya announcing the Grandma Rosa Fund, calling it the moment that redefined power. Chicago, on a winter morning. Snow blanketed the streets as conversations erupted everywhere. From small cafes and law firms to Wall Street trading floors, everyone spoke of Maya Laurent and Carrington Knight. A dynasty once thought untouchable had turned to dust because it chose cruelty over dignity. And a woman once dismissed had turned scorn into a torch lighting the world. As the sun climbed, its rays shimmered on Lake Michigan, reflecting into the room where Maya sat in silence. She did not need celebration, for this victory was not hers alone, but for all who had ever been forced into silence. Carrington Knight had ended, but its aftershocks had only just begun. 3 days after Carrington Knight, the grand mansion on Lakeshore Drive was no longer a symbol of luxury, but a battlefield of law. Black SUVs belonging to law firms, court vehicles, and swarms of reporters crowded outside the iron gates. Inside, the Carrington family sank deeper into the pit they had dug for themselves. A knock came, firm and unyielding. When the dark wooden doors opened, 2 court officers stepped in, accompanied by Aurelian's lawyers. Thick stacks of documents were placed on the walnut dining table, where once lavish feasts had been held. By order of the court, all liquid assets of Carrington Industries and its subsidiaries are hereby frozen, effective immediately. Victor Carrington gripped the files, his hands shaking. Every page felt like an obituary. He roared, his voice hoarse. "You cannot do this to me. I am Carrington. I, Alicia Monroe, Aurelian's chief legal officer, cut him off coldly. You were Carrington. Now you are nothing but a debtor. And the law does not show mercy. Genevieve stepped forward, still clinging to a silk gown, as if scraps of elegance could shield her. She extended her jeweled hands, trying to grasp Alicia's arm. Please, I have devoted my life to charities, to society. It was just words. One mistake, please tell Maya Laurent. Beg her to give us a chance. Alicia's eyes locked onto hers, her voice steady yet resonant. It was not a mistake. It was your nature. And Ms. Laurent does not need excuses. She needs the truth. And the truth was broadcast live to the entire world. Genevieve collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Tears streaked through her mascara, leaving black stains across her face, the blemishes of a dethroned queen of society. In the corner, Preston clutched his head. His phone rang without pause, not with friendly messages, but with legal warnings. A powerful law firm representing small investors had just filed suit against him and his family for deliberate damage. No, I only recorded the video, I didn't make any decisions, he stammered. But in the eyes of the law, that video was proof of his complicity in the humiliation that caused catastrophic financial loss. He staggered to his feet, mumbling, "Dad, what do we do?" Victor did not answer. His gaze was vacant, as though he had aged 10 years in 3 days. Sloane sat on the staircase, her hair disheveled, her satin dress wrinkled. She stared at an email from a luxury brand. "We are terminating our contract with Ms. Carrington immediately. All images associated with you will be removed." She wept silently. The years of being praised as Chicago's social goddess and the city's rose had vanished overnight. Now all that remained was her face on countless screens, tripping a woman with a cruel smile, despised by millions. That afternoon, Victor received a call from the central bank. The voice on the line was devoid of emotion. "Mr. Carrington, your $1.2 billion loan is no longer secured. We are initiating recovery. You have 14 days to pay, or your properties will be seized." Victor sank into his chair, sweat pouring down his face. He looked around the mansion, Van Gogh paintings, sculptures, Persian rugs. None of it was pride anymore. It was evidence of ruin. "We have lost everything," he whispered, his voice rasping from the depths of despair. Meanwhile, in the top-floor office of Aurelian's skyscraper in downtown Chicago, Maya Laurent sat quietly by the window, overlooking the city. Outside, the streets bustled. Inside, her phone rang incessantly. Reporters demanding interviews, investors eager to collaborate, social organizations sending congratulations. Maya said little. She signed documents to launch the Grandma Rosa Fund. $2.5 billion were being dispersed into startups, scholarships, and training programs. She knew that each dollar was more than capital. It was an answer, a transformation of the humiliation Carrington had inflicted into empowerment for those once overlooked. On social media, outrage began to shift into inspiration. Clips of Maya declaring, "All you need to know is that I am human, and that is enough," were shared millions of times. Students, entrepreneurs, young professionals posted, "We are Maya Laurent." A new hashtag surged into the global top 5. Respect Ice Power. Across Chicago, graffiti sprawled across walls. Justice is true strength. Late that night, as snow fell again, the Carrington mansion grew cold. Chandeliers still glowed, but their light revealed only decay. Victor slumped, Genevieve mute, Preston broken, Sloane curled up. Outside, reporters' voices still rang out. What will happen to the Carringtons? Can they survive this storm? Inside, no one answered. because they knew the truth. They were already dead. Dead in the eyes of the public. Dead in the world of finance. Dead in the prison of their own arrogance. Elsewhere, Maya Laurent quietly closed a file and sipped hot tea. She felt no gloating, only relief. She thought of her grandmother, those calloused hands, that raspy voice. Stand firm, Maya. One day, the world will know who you are. Carrington Knight had shown the world, and the price of contempt was not just a few drops of wine on a gown, but the fall of an empire a century old. Winter in Chicago cut through skin like knives, but for the Carrington family, the cold outside was nothing compared to the chill they now endured, the cold of rejection, poverty, and public shame. 2 weeks after that fateful night, Victor Carrington sat on an old L train rattling toward the suburbs. He wore a cheap coat, the polished leather shoes of his past, replaced with worn-out ones. Carrington Industries had officially declared bankruptcy. The court had seized the mansion, auctioned off the art collection, the supercars, the yachts. The man who once owned half of Chicago now sat pressed among tired workers returning home, his head bowed, afraid of being recognized. He had found a job as a low-level property manager for a small company. His salary was less than 1/10 of what he once spent on wine each month. Every day, Victor inspected old apartments, handled complaints about leaking pipes and jammed doors. In his mind, Maya Laurent's words echoed. "It wasn't me who destroyed your legacy. You set it on fire yourself." Each time he remembered, it felt like a cold flame consuming him from within. In a department store, Genevieve Carrington bent low, folding sweaters onto shelves. Her beige uniform carried the dust of fabric fibers. Every forced smile she offered a customer was like a knife slicing her pride. Once she had chaired charity boards, sat front row at Paris fashion shows. Now, women she once called friends walked past, casting furtive glances before quickly turning away. Some even pretended not to know her. She overheard the whispers behind her back. "That's Carrington, lost everything." Karma came for her. At night, she collapsed on her bed, staring at hands once covered in diamond rings, now bare. She realized at last that her social status had never truly been hers. It was borrowed light from the Carrington name. And now that light was gone. Preston lived in a cramped rental apartment with peeling paint and a broken stove. He worked night shifts for a cleaning company, scrubbing offices downtown. The cruel irony was that one of the buildings he cleaned belonged to Aurelion Stratos. Every time he saw Maya Laurent's glowing logo on the glass facade, he lowered his head, heart pounding. But he could not bow before the internet. The clip of him laughing wildly at the gala had become an immortal meme. His face was pasted onto clown images, captioned, "Lost 2.5 billion for one laugh." At supermarkets, young people pointed, "Hey, the Carrington clown." In bars, strangers pulled up the video to laugh louder. Each day, Preston lived in a prison without walls, a prison of global humiliation. Sloane rented a dingy apartment in an old block. She worked at a cafe near the train station. Every morning, her hands, once wrapped in satin gloves, now smelled of burnt coffee, her nails chipped from endless dishwashing. Young customers recognized her. Some whispered, some snapped photos, posting online. "This is Sloane Carrington, the wine-spilling villainess." Her social media was a battlefield. Any photo she posted was attacked with comments. "Remember? The white dress, the Bordeaux, the fake stumble." Sloane stared into the mirror, her beauty still present, but her eyes lifeless. For the first time, she understood. Beauty could buy status. but it could not buy back lost dignity. The press continued to publish the Carrington saga as a moral lesson for a new age. Business schools hosted seminars. The Carrington collapse, when power is defeated by prejudice. The name Carrington became a case study, a warning for those who still believed wealth could hide cruelty. The public was no longer curious, they judged. They shook their heads, sighed, and labeled the once mighty family as a monument toppled by arrogance. Meanwhile, Maya Laurent sat in Aurélion's brightly lit boardroom. On the large screen, numbers appeared. Dozens of startups funded by the Grandma Rosa Fund within 72 hours. Young, diverse faces glowed with joy as they presented their ideas. A free education app for immigrant children, a green tech company born in a garage, a manufacturing workshop run by women of color. Maya smiled. The $2.5 billion Carrington had clung to as a lifeline for a decaying dynasty had now become the lifeblood of thousands of new dreams. Late at night, in the small rental apartment, Victor sat alone by the window. Genevieve curled on the bed, no trace of grandeur left. Preston drank cheap liquor, desperate to drown the echo of laughter that haunted him. Sloane sat before the mirror, wiping off lipstick, staring at a face that had withered. No one spoke. The cramped apartment drowned in heavy silence, the silence of those who once believed they stood at the summit, now reduced to shadows of guilt. The Carrington story was no longer just the downfall of a family. It had become a symbol of an era, proof that human dignity could topple an empire centuries old. Elsewhere, Maya Laurent gazed quietly at the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan, whispering to herself, "Grandma, I did it. I showed them that no one can strip away your dignity, unless you allow it." And the Carringtons? All they had left was a bitter truth. Those who once believed themselves invincible had finally fallen to two simple words: justice prevails. 1 year after that fateful night in Chicago, the world had changed. No one spoke of the Carringtons as symbols of power anymore. Their name now existed only in articles, taught as a cautionary tale in business schools. On a winter morning, crowds gathered outside a once glorious Carrington penthouse. Today, a sign hung over it: auction of seized assets. Rare paintings that once adorned the grand hall sat behind glass, waiting to be sold. Genevieve's jewelry collection, the diamonds that once sparkled as she mocked Maya Laurent, was now auctioned to fund scholarships for poor students. Headlines cut like salt in wounds. Carrington, from Chicago, old money to a lesson in arrogance. One night, one gala, one empire collapsed. The family disappeared from guest lists, from charity boards, from wealth rankings. They had become ghosts in the very city they once ruled. In the suburbs, a grey-haired man sat on a morning L train. Victor Carrington, once a titan, now worked as a low-level property manager at an apartment complex. Each day he commuted by public transport, eyes weary, avoiding the stares of others. Sometimes a passenger recognized him, whispering, "That's Carrington, the man who lost $2.5 billion in a single night." Victor lowered his head, his chest tightening. He had grown used to the scorn. But the true pain wasn't in the looks of others. It was in the memory of that moment when Maya Laurent pulled out the steel business card and revealed who she was. That moment had closed the chapter of his life forever. In a luxury store, Genevieve Carrington folded clothes onto shelves. She still carried herself with straight posture, forcing smiles at customers. But her hands trembled. With each sweater she folded, it felt like folding away the arrogance of her past. Old friends avoided her. Charity boards refused her. The press branded her the fallen queen of society. Genevieve once thrived under camera flashes. Now she lived in the shadows of oblivion. Each night she whispered to her reflection, "Just one word, one outburst cost me everything." Preston lived in a shabby apartment. By day he slept. By night he cleaned office floors. The video of him laughing at Maya's pain had become an immortal meme, even printed in sociology textbooks as the consequence of privilege. In bars, strangers still played the clip to mock him. Online, his name was forever tied to the image of a clown. Preston once believed he was the prince of a dynasty. Now he was nothing but the world's fool. Sloane worked as a barista in a small cafe. The hands once covered in diamond rings were now rough, steeped in the smell of burnt coffee. Sometimes customers recognized her, whispering, "That's the girl who spilled wine on the CEO." Her cheeks flushed, her eyes cast downward. Her social media accounts lay abandoned, every post flooded with outrage. Though her beauty remained, the light in her eyes was gone. She knew now. Beauty could buy status, but not restore lost honor. And what of Maya Laurent? In the year that followed, she avoided talk shows and noisy interviews. Yet her name appeared everywhere, not through scandal, but through achievement. The Grandma Rosa Fund had already financed more than 300 minority-founded startups. Thousands of new jobs had been created. Success stories bloomed from money Carrington once claimed as theirs. Maya stood on stage at a global conference, the lights shining upon her. Her voice was steady, warm. True power does not lie in how much wealth you have, but in how you use it. A family chose arrogance and lost everything. We choose justice, and together we build a new world. The hall rose in thunderous applause. In the media, the Carrington name no longer meant wealth, but the fatal cost of pride. Business schools added the Carrington collapse to their curriculum. Students learned dignity and respect are the most sustainable currencies. Meanwhile, Maya Laurent became a symbol, not because she was a $62 billion CEO, but because she turned personal humiliation into a chance to transform society. On a winter afternoon, as snow blanketed the city, reporters gathered outside the Carringtons' rundown apartment. But no one came out. No statements, no defenses. They had become shadows in history. A journalist wrote, "The death of the Carrington Empire didn't happen in war or crisis, but at a party, in cruel laughter. And from that laughter, they lost it all." Night fell. By Lake Michigan, Maya stood alone, the cold wind brushing her face. She whispered to her grandmother's memory, "I did it. I turned pain into justice." Behind her, the city lights shimmered, reflected across the water. Each spark looked like a small flame of hope. Hope born from the very fortune the Carringtons had lost. The story closed, but its echo remained. When you disregard the dignity of others, you can lose the world. But when you defend it, you can change humanity. In the turbulent world of business, the Carrington Empire didn't collapse because of a balance sheet or a failed deal. They fell because of arrogance in the way they treated another human being. That fateful night taught the world a bitter but simple lesson. You do not need to know who someone is, whether they are rich or poor, powerful or ordinary. You only need to know they are human, and that alone makes them worthy of respect. The Carrington family forgot that truth. They laughed at another's pain. They believed that social status, money, and prestige were shields against all wrongdoing. But the harsh reality was laid bare. When dignity is trampled an empire can be blown away in a matter of hours. Maya Laurent, on the other hand, proved the opposite. She did not need to shout. She did not need to seek revenge with violence. With one silent but decisive act, cancelling a $2.5 billion deal, she rewrote history. More importantly, she transformed the humiliation she endured into opportunity for thousands through the Grandma Rosa Fund. That is true power. Not the power to humiliate, but the power to build. Not the power to hoard, but the power to spread opportunity. Today, 1 year later, the Carrington name is remembered only as a warning in business case studies. And Maya Laurent, once a victim of scorn, has become a symbol of resilience, justice, and the belief that dignity is the most enduring currency. And this is the message for us all. Every time we laugh at another's pain, we plant the seeds of our own destruction. But every time we choose respect, we sow the seeds of a more sustainable future. If this story has made you reflect, press like to spread the message. Subscribe to join the journeys ahead, where we continue to expose arrogance and defend human dignity, and leave a comment with the words "true power," because real power does not lie in your wallet, but in how you treat others.